Hello everyone, my name is Daniel von Salzen and I am the TA for the Chemistry 3131 Biochemistry Lab. In this little video I want to kind of go over the course as well as the syllabus so that you guys will have a very general idea of what you need to do in order to receive an A. If you ever have any questions or need to contact me, you can always email me at dhvonsalzen@minors.utep.edu. So starting off with a very brief description of the actual lab. So the whole lab is made to focus on the modern biochemistry techniques that are used not only in biochemical labs today, but also in biology, microbiology, as well as chemistry. And so the goal for us specifically is to try to clone and purify the beta-galactosidase protein. So we're going to be starting off all the way at the beginning by first cloning the beta-gal gene. From the gene, we want to express it in E. coli cells, then purify our protein out of these E. coli cells before running some kind of test. And so this whole semester-long project is going to give you a general idea of what we do step by step and why we do these experiments. So all this information about the labs we'll be performing and maybe some background information can be found in the lab manual, which is up on Blackboard. So in order to receive an A in this lab, I just want to go over the actual grading scheme. So you'll only be graded on 3 kind of portions in this lab. The first is making up 50% of the lab, which is your lab reports. After every lab, there will be a lab report due the following week before midnight. So please make sure to turn these in on time. 30% of your grade will be based off of online quizzes. So these quizzes will always be based around the current lab we're working on so that you can kind of use these labs to gain the theory and make sure that you understand it so that when you write your lab reports, you should have a very firm grasp of why these techniques are important. And then finally, at the conclusion of the whole semester, there will be a final oral presentation. And this will be about a 10 to 15 long minute recording of you just talking about the whole semester long project that you've done with your, that I've done, and just kind of talking about the theory and what you've learned. So I just want to note that there's going to be no extra credit, so please make sure to be punctual and turn in all your assignments on time. So kind of going a little bit more in depth, starting with the lab reports. So as I said, all of these experiments are going to be performed by me, and I'll make sure to record everything as much as possible. If there's ever information that I leave out of the video, I'll make sure to kind of include it on Blackboard so that you guys can write these lab reports. So while everyone is receiving the same data, I just want you to make sure that you still write these reports individually. Because we're using Blackboard as well as the safe assign mechanic in Blackboard, Blackboard will be able to kind of determine if you guys are copying off of each other. So please don't try to get a friend's report or paraphrase a friend's report, because Blackboard is really good at catching this information. And if I catch any cheaters, I will have to give you a 0. Again, reports will always be due the following week before midnight. And if it is ever turned in past midnight, it will be considered late. I'll still accept these lab reports. However, for every day that it is late, just know you will be losing 10 points off of the grade. So if the lab report started off as a 80, but it was a day late, then it's now a 70. So make sure to also look in the lab manual for each of these experiments for specific guidelines on what these reports need to include. The lab manual is kind of your best friend for this lab. I even kind of tell you what I want in each of the segments, starting with the abstract, the introduction, the methods, the results, discussion, conclusion, as well as references, So please make sure how you look at the lab manual so you understand the formatting. And then always check at the end of each experiment for very specific information that I want to see in the lab report. So next are the online quizzes. So same as the lab report, they will be due the following week at the same time. And these quizzes will always be based off of that current lab that we're working on. So I kind of advise that before you start on your lab report, it might be a good idea to do the quizzes. This way you can kind of get a good grasp on the theory or key information that I want you to know. And then finally, we have the final presentation. For this final presentation, what you guys will basically be doing is just recording that 10 to 15 minute video that should give a very nice summary, a nice story of the entire semester-long project. I want this presentation to be somewhat similar to what a presentation you would give if you were presenting during a conference. So I want these, presentations to primarily focus on the theory as well as important information that pertains to each of the experiments. That's just kind of a very general idea of these presentations. As we go further along the lab, I'll make sure to kind of remind you about the final presentation as well as give more information if it's needed. Something very important is to know the drop deadline. Funny enough, the drop deadline for this semester is April 1st. So if you ever have a feeling that you may not pass the lab, just know that you can drop by April 1st. So that's pretty much everything from the syllabus that I want to talk about. And before I finish off this little video, I thought I would briefly go over lab safety because I still have to talk about it. And I didn't want to make it its own little video, especially since we're not going to be, or you guys won't be in the lab. So just a kind of a quick summary. Just make sure you pay attention to this because I will quiz you on some of this information. So starting off with the really basics of lab safety, make sure to always wear eye protection so that chemicals don't enter the eyes. Always wear a lab coat because you don't want, since most chemistry labs have acids and other hazardous chemicals, you don't want that getting to your skin or on your clothes. Don't eat or drink in the lab because food can kind of capture any, or if food gets contaminated with chemicals, that could get you sick. Only make sure that authorized personnel are in the lab. We don't want accidents to happen because someone doesn't belong in the lab. Always dress appropriately. Again, you want to protect yourself so that chemicals don't get on your skin. Make sure to always clean up after yourself. So washing your glassware, washing your bench, disinfecting your work area, things like that. Here's a key thing that's always important when you enter a lab. Make sure to know where the safety equipment is. You never know when you walk into a lab and then something happens. It's always good to know exactly where all the safety equipment usually is. Don't casually dispose of chemicals down the drain. Remember, we don't want these chemicals to land into the environment because it could ruin the environment. That's why we have very special containers such as the aqueous waste, the halogenated wastes. So always make sure waste goes into the appropriate bin. For people with very long hair, you want to make sure to tie things back. This is why, mostly so that they don't get burned whenever you're working with an open flame or come into contact with chemicals. Also because you don't want them to land on your experiments and contaminate your experiments. Just a couple more. Always make sure to wash your hands. We don't want to let chemicals leave the lab and contaminate the outside and get someone else sick. Always pour strong acids or bases into water and not vice versa. Doing it the other way around can cause a reaction that will cause, steam and smoke to kind of come out. And depending on how much you add, it could be violent and will cause the acid to splatter, getting onto your skin. Sometimes chemicals will get on your skin, and as much as we want to avoid that, sometimes it just happens. So if that ever happens, make sure to flush it immediately with water. So if large amounts of there's ever just like a small amount of chemicals that get onto your skin, you can always wash it in the sink. For large amounts, we do have a safety shower that's usually on the outside of every lab. And if it ever gets into your eyes, we do have eye wash stations that are usually right by the sink as well. Make sure to always keep the lab clean and not place backpacks or other personal items kind of in a way that people could trip on them. The last thing we want is people to be holding some kind of chemicals and tripping and dropping it all over the floor. Always treat your equipment with care. So even small pipetters that we use every day, we have to be very gentle with them because they are delicate machines. If you have any questions on an instrument or you are unsure, always make sure you get help. We don't want you to be confused and end up damaging machinery. Another good thing to note is if machines don't act, I guess, properly, always talk to either the TA or an instructor or someone so that we can figure out what's going wrong with it. And then finally, just always make sure to be careful. You don't want to hurt yourself or others, so make sure you think before you do something in the lab. So with that, that kind of concludes everything I want to talk about in this very first video. I hope you guys enjoy this semester, and I'll talk to you guys soon.